I've had success with clients who were able to level up their salary by working with me and move into roles that would pay them anywhere between $15,000 to $40,000. Who you work with will have so many implications on how successful you are and also how good you feel about being at work. I had my own career separate from the coaching world, separate from careers where I was within 8 years, I was able to level up my own career from assistant to coordinator to officer to manager. And then my last role was director level role.
I thought to myself, I have a decision to make here. I can stay here and, stay with a secure job, but I know that my shine or my sparkle will have dulled in 10 years. Seeing your future and thinking ahead, okay, if I stay here, what happens? And I thought, no, if I'm doing myself a disservice and I know that I'm taking a risk by leaving and going into something that's uncertain.
There's a saying, where you are right now is what you pictured 5 years ago or 10 years ago.
I would much prefer to work hard at innovating something than to come to work and do something over and over and over again that I know that we could have solved the problem.
How do you go from micro school to movement?
If Amazon, TikTok, all these social media platforms, if they are generating like $80 billion a year, why can't we create systems that generate profit, but that profit goes to the community so we can reinvest in our children?
This is a movement that's going to last for generations, hands down. I see that, I understand that.
We are taking responsibility for our children. We're taking responsibility for their education. We can't continue this way. And I know
it went from micro school to movement.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Conscious Leader Podcast, where I, your host, Elise Abraham, interview guests who are consciously leading and creating impact and influence in the lives of those in their field. If you're new to the channel, welcome. And if you like this episode, don't forget to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. In today's episode, you'll gain insights into how to master your leadership skills. You'll also learn how to thrive in your career, as well as innovative educational hacks for 2025. Let's get started. Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Conscious Leader Podcast, where I introduce leaders who are consciously leading in their industry. Today, I have a very special and dear guest. Her name is Sonya. Dare I call her friend? Yes. Why? Because we have been doing some podcasting, some lives and recordings together, and I've gotten to know her a bit more over the course of this year. Sonya is a career coach, but what am I going to tell you? I'm going to let her introduce herself. Now, if you're new to the channel, welcome. And if you happen to like this episode, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button. Hi, Sonya. How are you today?
I'm great. Thank you. The sun is shining. I can't complain. How are you?
I am great. Last night was fire. Thank you so much for joining us last night. Please share with my audience who you are, who you serve, and how are you influencing and impacting lives?
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for the opportunity to connect again. It's always lovely to share insight and chat away with you. So right now, where I am in my career, I am a career coach. I have my own coaching practice where I'm able to support clients on a one-on-one basis with whatever they may need. That could be from resume to building their LinkedIn, personal branding elements, and even interview coaching. That's probably one of my most favorite things to work on is interview coaching. I also support with workshop facilitations for different community groups and different organizations. And then I am also an executive recruiter for a US-based firm where I'm able to support organizations in their hiring needs and supporting gaps in their team. And what's interesting about me as a career coach and as a recruiter is that this wasn't always my career. Prior to this year, I had my own career separate from the coaching world, separate from careers where I was in the nonprofit sector. And within 8 years, I was able to level up my own career from assistant to coordinator to officer to manager. And then my last role was director director level role. So I really took the learnings that I've experienced in my own journeys of leveling up and being able to share that with my community and with my followers.
Wow, thank you so very much. That is a lot to digest. You did a lot of things in a very short period of time, actually close to a decade. It seems like it's short, but it's very long, but it's that whole progress. I want to focus on your role now as an entrepreneur. I want to focus on that today. So, share with us, why career coaching? What need did you see out there that said, yes, I have the solution for you?
Yes, I think it was a matter of, I didn't always set out to be a career coach. Like I mentioned, I was in my own career. I was really thriving. I was leveling up every 1 to 2 years. I was moving on to the next big challenge that was available to me. But what I found was people were finding me on LinkedIn. People were referring other people to me to have coffee chats and said, if you are looking to grow in your career, or if you need help with networking, or if there's something that you need, check out this person on LinkedIn. So I was starting to get an influx of LinkedIn messages, and I would take on coffee chats as much as I could. Even this was when I was only 2-3 years into my full-time career. I was only a coordinator / programs officer at the time, and I was taking on these coffee chats trying to help as many people as possible. And I really found that a lot of people that were coming to me were women, and they were women of color that were looking for a little bit more support because in their families, in their immediate network, they didn't really have access to anyone who was in business or building out their own niche in business. They were more so taking on other types of career paths, and that was something where I really felt compelled to help with, because that was exactly my journey as well. I didn't originally go to school to pursue business. HR was very, very far from what I thought I would ever pursue. My original majors in university was English and theater. I was going to be a high school teacher, and I was really excited about that because I am very theatrical. I was very good in those subjects, and I wanted to, again, help people. I wanted to help young people. And then I took a leap of faith after first year university. I thought, I'm supposed to apply for teachers college, and I didn't. And there's a reason. There's a reason why in my gut I didn't apply. And it was because that wasn't really the path that I wanted to go down. And I took a leap of faith on myself. I did a bunch of summer school courses to catch up with what I had missed so that I could still graduate in my 4-year time block. So really the need to help people, help women, and with really difficult topics, like a lot of people aren't comfortable with talking about themselves. Personal branding, that's why it's so important. That I was pulling stats this morning for a salary negotiation presentation I'm giving later. The stats are jarring around women who don't negotiate because of fear of repercussions of negotiating and what those implications are in their career later on. So this is why I do what I do, so I can help as many people as I can, just based off of knowledge that wasn't accessible to me at the time, or people that weren't in my network at the time, that I really had to break down those barriers and figure out.
Yes. Wow. That's it's quite a journey, and it's such an organic flow, this journey that's happening. And thank you so much for doing what you do, because you're helping many women across North America being able to find their voice, stand up, and to represent themselves in an authentic and genuine way. A lot of people may look at women from North America as because they see the equality stuff and the feminist this and all of these things, but there's still struggles that are happening in corporate America because it is male dominated. Now, you have been in this director position. You now recruit other directors and C-suite executives for major corporations. And you just did this like two days ago. You met someone and you were working with her as a client, and now she got this exceptional role. What is the fear right now in industry for executives, female executives that want to take their career to that next level?
Yes, I think there's a few fears, and I've seen this over and over again, where there are traditionally men who are in this C-suite role who have, they've been in that role for 10 plus years, and then they are deciding to resign. And when they're resigning and when they're moving on to their next opportunity, they're leaving the organization in not a great place. So then that means that typically a female executive is moving into that role, and they aren't set up for success. To succeed in their role. And they're often left to make super challenging decisions within their first few months, within their first year of being in the role. And it's been quite challenging, and it's been quite upsetting for me personally to read a lot of these stories. And I've even seen it with my own eyes with some of the work that I've been exposed to, that's happened. And it's quite unfortunate, because it's not a situation that anyone wants to be in when you're put in a work situation where you're not going to thrive and you're not set up to thrive. So that's definitely one fear, I'd say, is making sure that you're checking all the boxes to ensure that you have the support that you need and that you are set up for success. So I think that's one fear that, because of the media and because of stories that we're hearing, it's more known now. I would say other situations that, working relationships with who you're working with. Sometimes at that executive level, you actually report into a board. So when you're no longer reporting into one person and you're reporting into a governing body of people, that can be a challenge in its own, because now you're thinking about communication styles for 7, 8, 10 different people, working styles for 7, 8, 10 different people. And that can often be a challenge. And thinking through logistically what makes sense in their career, and being strategic about the decisions that they're making. Because, at that level, at that senior level, as a recruiter, we don't want to see that, they're moving around every other year or so. That is very common earlier in someone's career, because you're still figuring out what you like. You're figuring out what sectors, what environments, what work for you. And that's very common early in your career. But when you're later on in your career, we tend to look at candidates who we tend to think of them as stronger if they've been there for a few years. They've made important strategic decisions. They've moved the dial in different places in the organization to be able to support with various different levels. And those are important things, because then that makes that the executive, the candidate in the interview, have very solid examples and things to talk about in their interview and in their hero bank.
I think that's the nature of true self-awareness. And I think because of all the distractions that we have, like when you wake up in a day, I can't remember what the number is, but there's a number, and it's absolutely ridiculous how many ads and how much content we consume in a day. And so after consuming all that content and being shown all of these ads and having all of these distractions, we've got dings coming from our wrist, from our pockets, from our phone, TV, computer. Like, when do we actually get in touch with ourselves?
Mm-hmm.
And so especially young people today, like who have grown up with technology, when do they get the opportunity to sit with themselves and ask the right questions?
And that's a valid point. And I want you to expand on this, because you're here talking about what are you driven by. You mentioned your generation growing up with technology. My generation didn't grow up with technology. Like my parents was like, you need to go outside. You can't be watching TV all day. It's going to rot your brain, right? Now
it's true.
It's going to rot your brain. Don't watch TV. But you're allowing them to tap into what are you driven by, which is no small feat. It sounds easy, it's not. But then how do they combat all the dings that you mentioned? So before you answer that question, start off with, why did you decide what are you driven by to start this company, to start this enterprise? And then lead us on this journey to how your solution can help your generation.
Yeah, that's a big question. And absolutely, let me take you back to when I started my career. I was in a completely different field. I graduated with a Bachelor of Technology in Graphic Communications, and then I went directly into print manufacturing for healthcare. So at the time, I was really excited. I thought, it was a huge global billion-dollar company. I thought, okay, I did what I needed to do. I followed the blueprint. I went to school. I got a job. I got a good job, and I did what I need to do. Now the universe is going to deliver back to me. And so very quickly, I started to notice a bunch of things around me. So first and foremost, the work. At first, everything was new, but then after a while, everything became monotonous. I started to notice that we're not really using technology to the best of our ability. We're doing things that could be automated. We are doing things that could be improved, could be innovated. This seems like a waste of my time and creativity. And so, in an effort to try and innovate and change those things, I got met with roadblocks because there were people there who were used to doing the same thing for the last 10, 20 years. And they were comfortable in that. So they've lost that innovation and creativity. And on top of that, there was a lot of people who were miserable in the positions that they were in. However, they had been there for so long that they didn't know anything else and they weren't willing to necessarily explore. And I thinking to myself, I'm like, that can't be fulfilling. How did you get here? And then I thought to myself, how did I get here? Because I started to become more and more disengaged. And I just, like the rest of the team around me, there's a lot of disengagement. I'm like, how did we get here? And if I'm going to make a decision to move in my career and change something here, what is it that I need to consider? And that's when my mind started to think about what are the questions that I didn't ask myself that got me here? And it was, I never asked myself what I was driven by. Because had I asked myself what I was driven by, I would have put myself in a career and in a position that would have fueled my motivation. Instead of just picking something that I thought would be good for me based on all these arbitrary factors that we're told, like make sure you get a good job with this and with that. And instead of make sure you're working somewhere that aligns with you and that you're going to be able to grow in. So not asking those right questions. And so there, aside from what are you driven by, there's many other questions you can ask yourself, but it all came down to that. And so I played around with that idea for a while until I'm like, I know I have something here. And then it started out, I'm asking people what they're driven by. And over and over and over again, Delisa, I asked people what they're driven by. And they said, oh, I don't know. I've never thought about that. And in those moments, I'm like, we don't think about these things. But yet we're making decisions, life-changing decisions without knowing what we're truly driven by and what our core values are. So in that moment, I'm like, okay, I need to do something here and I need to work with people to help them understand those things. And then maybe they determine after having gone through that self-awareness process that they're exactly where they're supposed to be. But more often than not, they discover, how did I get myself here? I'm in the wrong place. And then from there, it's like, now it's up to you. You're consciously making decisions that are right for you. And so now it's grown into, okay, how do we build on that for your team? How are we asking the members of your team what they're driven by so that we can align them and have them become more engaged and more motivated and more driven? And so that was the journey. So it really was a personal experience that led into this broader awareness of what most people are going through.
And that's generally how businesses start, right?
Mm-hmm.
You started out in technology. Woman in tech, not easy feat. I know it's popular. I know we have girls in STEM and all of these things that are really great. But it is very easy for women, because it's in a male-dominated space, to become exceptionally masculine in their approach and because these questions that you are asking, not that men don't ask these questions, when we're looking at males, females, and how they operate, how they think their thought pattern is, survival, thriving. When you're looking at all of that, now you're coming down to what are you driven by? But you did this in a male dominated space at a like multi-billion dollar corporation. Why? I know you explained that you were, I know you explained that. And the reason why I'm asking you why is because there are women in male dominated technology space at some of them maybe $1 million companies, some of them are at startups, but they're not necessarily tapping into what am I driven by? And I'm pretty sure you've come across that.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
yeah, like what do you do? Like before I even get into your workshop space, what do you do with just that? I know it's a general
Yeah.
question, but what do you do?
Yeah. So the why behind it all was that I saw my future. I saw my future because in that position, I saw exactly, if I had stayed where I was, I saw exactly how I would feel 10 years down the line. And being around people who had a problem for every solution, I knew exactly where I was going to end up. And I thought to myself, I have a decision to make here. I can stay here and, stay with a secure job, but I know that my shine or my sparkle will have dulled in 10 years and I will end up like this. And I thought, no, if I'm doing myself a disservice and I know that I'm taking a risk by leaving and going into something that's uncertain, however, I'm going to learn from it. And guess what? If it doesn't work out, I will take those lessons and apply it somewhere else.
Yeah, 100%.
Right? I would much prefer to work hard at innovating something than to come to work and do something over and over and over again that I know that we could have solved the problem, put it to bed, automate it, and now move on to a more challenging problem.
Yeah.
And constantly elevate in that sense. So seeing your future and thinking ahead, okay, if I stay here, what happens? And am I okay with that? And if you're not okay with that, then present you needs to make a change for future you.
Well, 100%. There's this saying, where you are right now is what you pictured 5 years ago or 10 years ago. So, and it's not a lie. It's not a lie. Now you've taken the bold move. You've cultivated a community, fostered relationships, and genuinely foster relationships. And I say this because I'm part of your community. I say this because I see the young women and men as well in your network. So I'm seeing the results. How do you approach knowing what you know when you walk into, perhaps it's a small business or a mid-sized business, a big business? How do you approach that, knowing what you know from a feminine perspective, the female mind, and you're perhaps encountering the masculine who are in these positions of authority, who might like that question, what are you driven by? Because that's a good question. It's a generic question across the board, but they may not fully understand what they're driven by does not equate what their team is driven by. How do you approach that?
Yeah, it is. I would say it's asking the right questions. And even further to your point about the masculine and feminine approach, one thing I noticed is that the masculine tends to approach those situations by asking questions to get to the answer they want. So I would ask you a question so that you can arrive to the conclusion that I want you to arrive at. Whereas from the feminine perspective, you're asking questions to just ask questions and lead to the next question, so that I'm just opening your mind up to other opportunities. So instead of me trying to be like, okay, well, did you think about this? Did you think about this? And leading you along this journey to arrive at this conclusion that I'm at over here, instead I'm like, okay, well, what led you to this? What was your thought process? And so I'm getting an understanding of the full picture. And so that's exactly how I approach it. I ask questions to understand, as opposed to asking questions to persuade. And so once I have an understanding, then I just ask a question to sort of disrupt the thinking pattern and ask, so if this continues, is this where you want to be?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, no. If it is, then then maybe there's nothing that I can help you with if that's exactly where you want to go. However, if it's not and you want change, now that's a different conversation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So I would say the questions.
yes, and it's interesting, and I agree with you because of the nature of what I do. Men are very, it's direct. This is like, we're going here. You said you're going here. We're going here. That's it. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? It has worked, and it works. Sometimes that's what you need to like get
Yes.
something done. Sometimes that's just what you need. Some naysayers might say your approach will take too long, and we live in a time where I need this done last week.
Yeah.
Why are you taking me on this journey? What are the benefits of this journey? Please share with us. What are the benefits of your approach versus other approaches?
Yes, no, that's a great question. And I would argue that, when something is more linear, the direct approach truly helps. And I think there's definitely a place for it. But when you're talking about things like human capital and motivation and engagement, there's no direct approach, and everybody is so different that you have to start considering other things. And without considering those other things, you may waste your time. So I would argue that, say, for example, you come into a team and you notice there's disengagement. And if you just look at it one way in this linear approach, like, let's get this done, let's boost engagement, let's throw some pizza, let's throw some perks, let's throw some benefits there. And then it fails because you haven't gone through all of this exploration and all of this assessment that you needed to actually understand what they're looking for. Because maybe all they wanted was a little bit of recognition.
Mm-hmm.
But yet you've now wasted time, wasted money with all these perks that they didn't care about, but you didn't take the time to understand.
That's a good.
And so I would say bringing that time up front just to actually make the right decision is important.
Mm-hmm.
If you truly are interested in, building engagement and lowering things like turnover, increasing retention, and having a little bit more motivation and building a better culture, I think those things are important, and they're things that are not quick fixes.
The idea was, if Amazon, TikTok, all these social media platforms, if they are generating like $80 billion a year, crazy, right? Why can't we create systems that generate profit, but that profit goes to the community so we can reinvest in our children, and essentially just revamp the entire sector and put money where it needs to go. So as opposed to top-down systems, which is where the problem lies, we have a bottom-up system where the community dictates how resources are used, where the resources go, and because there's so much systemic corruption, and if we can work towards eliminating that corruption and really putting children at the center and focus, why not? It just seems like a no-brainer. And so I've evolved the website. It's now in its second evolution process. And so now we're kind of in that investment phase because you need to reinvest. And so that something can grow. And we are really happy that we're starting to get this really amazing attention working together. So we have education leadership meetings. We put our intellectual acumen together so that we are sharing with each other, which means we share from each other's mistakes, so we learn faster, and we can evolve the education landscape to where it needs to go, because we have crisis on top of crisis, not only education, but ideologies that are too fringe, that don't put our children's mental health in the center. And it's very important that we address these needs. And hopefully, as we work together, we can snowball and really tackle these needs and put money where it needs to go, back into community, back into the kids.
Well, I like that. Community and kids.
children and community, right? You're putting it back together, and you're doing this is a movement. Essentially, this is not just a company that you're going to start and then it's you're going to sell, and no, this is a movement that's going to last for generations, hands down. I see that, I understand that. I'm going to ask you though, you started off, you've been an educator, as you mentioned, for about 20 years. Then you got married, you have your children, and you're like, you know what? I don't like what I'm seeing from my kids. There must be a better option. So now you start your micro school, your mini school. And in that process, on a napkin, now you're like, I'm just going to start a movement. It went from micro school to movement, educational movement. I want, please share with the audience, how do you go from micro school to movement? How does that work?
Well, I couldn't keep both, so I had to know what my boundaries were, and my boundaries were, you can't have it all at the same time. But there's so many powerful educators, and it's kind of a crazy idea. So a lot of people don't really want to take it on and think that it's really far-fetched that we can empower people. But to see I understand people are going to be very defensive of the systems that that they know.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality of the situation is I've seen behind the red curtain, so to speak. And I've mingled with all the top dogs in education, and I know how things work. And these systems are not created to benefit the kids. And I've worked with very hard to serve children, low economic families, and they deserve the best. And money is not put into certain areas to push for their success. And that needs to change, because when you do invest,
Mm-hmm.
it elevates society as a whole. And I'm really committed to that. And given that my son is on the spectrum, there are so many kids with neurodivergent needs, kids that are that don't have the skills to be productive members of society. But if they are poured into in a way by loving people, we can really, because right now society is going in a direction that's very concerning.
Yeah.
And our children don't have they don't have the backbone, they don't have the skills to take this on, and it's going to snowball and become worse if we don't do this. In our generation, we have the skills, we have the knowledge, we have the backbone.
Yeah.
And it is our responsibility to leave this legacy and to be surrounded by so many conscious educators and leaders that are saying, like, no, we are taking responsibility for our children. We're taking responsibility for their education. It's very heartwarming, because these systems they kill creativity. They don't, if you're a hardworking educator, you don't get a bonus.
Yeah.
Bare minimum is like, that's what's kind of left.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not something that you build a legacy on. And we need to really focus on what it's going to take. And I know people are scared of privatization, but think of it in this way. These are all small business owners. When you invest in the small business owners, when you invest local, they will reinvest by investing in their children. And it's almost like it greases the wheel itself, because, like, for example, I will reinvest in Delisa. Delisa will reinvest in me. She'll invest in someone else. Someone else will invest. Like, it becomes this exchange where we're supporting each other and we're sharing wealth, abundance, community, connection, communication, because we can't continue this way. And I know tearing down, it's not tearing down these systems, but these systems are no longer serving us.
Yeah.
And so what can we do, right?
100%, and that's where you step in. What can we do? And you're creating that option. But there are systems in place, and we see this. You can go on IG, TikTok, any one of them, and they're talking about how the education system is not serving. And then you're seeing lots of people who are top of their game saying, you know what, I should have homeschooled my children.
They're actually saying that I should have put my child somewhere else, or they're saying, you know what, I should have focused on trades when my children were younger, not because they're not smart or anything. They're brilliant kids, but this would have been a better avenue for them to help support their growth, to cultivate it. So, what you're doing as part of your movement, creating community, but you're also, making people employable. You're making them take ownership and becoming entrepreneurs, because that is huge, right? With the entrepreneurship, that investment, you're investing in a generation that's going to reinvest in the community, and that builds the economy. People do not recognize what, like, or a lot of people don't fully understand when the people are educated, when they are equipped and skilled in a specific task or trade or whatever it is, it builds the economy, because now they can do a job. Now they can start a business. Now they can employ people. So your movement, yes, is putting into the community and helping the next few generations, but you're also helping to boost the economy because of the educational piece that's happening. Unbelievable.
Absolutely. And these resources cost money. Like
Yeah.
our EAs are paid poverty, and these are the ones that are nurturing our child's souls, or all these people. Like they deserve to be paid so that if people in positions with children can support their
Mhm.
families, they feel good. That goodness will be poured into the kids, and there's that sense of reciprocity, right, that starts to build. And a lot of people are homeschooling, and I hear the homeschoolers say, like, everyone can do it. And yes, they can. However, I do believe that there is different worlds
Yes.
of different socioeconomic statuses.
Mhm.
So, um, one personal story is I grew up in a rough neighborhood. So I was, of the lower socioeconomic
Mhm.
realm. And but my mother she cleaned houses, and and a lot of them she had raised their children, they were connected to her and that kind of thing. So they invited us to some of these events, and she didn't speak English very well. She had a fourth grade education, and she had a lot of anxiety. And I'm like, Mom, why do you even bring us to these things? Like, if it makes you so nervous, what's the point? And she's like, I want you to see a world that I'll never be able to give you.
Mhm.
And so it's one of those things where I was able to see that
Yeah.
world. But living in a lower socioeconomic, working, a lot of these kids don't have access, and we need to improve that access so they can fill in some of those skill gaps that their parents might not have, because we all have skill set gaps regardless. But depending on where you came from, what you had access to, that could, interfere. And we always want to give our kids more.
Mhm.
And if we work as a community, we can give these kids more.
Mhm. Mhm.
And because then there's that exchange, right? It's because some, like a single mom who doesn't have access to, more like finances, if their kid's into robotics, but they can't pay for the program, they should be able to take that program. And we want to improve that. And I think it could change the world. I know it won't be quickly,